When we talk about corruption in India, we often imagine something very big. Politicians, suitcases full of cash, secret meetings, scandals on television. But corruption does not start there. It starts much earlier, much smaller, and much closer to our daily lives. Imagine a normal Indian citizen, someone who wants a simple thing, driving license, a land record correction, a hospital bed, a government certificate. On paper, it is promised to be free, transparent, and time bound. But in reality, the process is very slow, confusing, and very exhausting. Files move, but they don't really move. Applications are submitted, but nothing happens. And then someone gives you a suggestion. If you want this done faster, there is a way. This is where corruption becomes normal. Most people don't pay bribes because they are bad people. They pay because the system pushes them to a corner. Time becomes money and delay becomes punishment. And corruption becomes a shortcut that slowly turns into a habit. Over the years, corruption in India has changed its face. Firstly, it was mostly cash. Now it is far more sophisticated. It moves through contractors, shell companies, electoral fundings, policy manipulation, and regulatory silence. It is not always illegal on paper, but it is deeply unethical in practice. Take infrastructure projects. India is building roads, railways, ports, airports at massive scale. This is necessary for development, but wherever there is big money and urgency, there is also risk. Investigative reports in 2024 revealed serious irregularities in certain public work contracts where costs were inflated, quality was compromised, and the same set of companies kept winning bids again and again. On paper, everything followed procedure. But when journalists and auditors looked closely, patterns started emerging. Another area where corruption has become more subtle is public recruitments and examinations. In recent years, multiple exam paper leaks have surfaced across states. In 2024 and 25, fresh allegations again showed how recruitment exams for government jobs were compromised. For millions of young Indians, government job is not just employment, it is stability, it's dignity. When exams are leaked or manipulated, it is not just corruption, it is theft of dreams. But what makes this worse is that accountability is rare. Middlemen are caught, small operators are arrested, but the larger network often remain untouched. And then there is political fundings. On paper, in theory, political donations are meant to be transparent, available for public. In practice, loopholes allow enormous sum of money to flow without clear public inspection. By 2025, concerns were repeatedly raised by civil society groups about the lack of visibility in how political parties receive and spend funds. When money influences policy decisions, corruption does not need bribes. It simply needs silence. Corruption also affects that sectors that we heavily depend on for our survival: health, education, and welfare. During audits and investigative reports in 2024 and 25, questions were raised about achieving practices in public healthcare schemes where equipments were overpriced or poorly maintained despite large budgets. For an ordinary citizen, this translates into overcrowded hospitals, broken machines, and delayed treatment. The tragedy of corruption is not just financial loss, it is human cost. A delayed ambulance, a collapsed building, a substandard road, a missing welfare payment. Each of these is linked somewhere down in the line to the compromised decisions. Now, it is important to say this clearly. Corruption is not limited to one party, one government, or one institution. It is systematic. Corruption survives because it adapts. Whenever rules change, corruption finds a new gap. Technology was supposed to reduce corruption, but in many ways it has helped. Things like direct benefit transfer, digital payments, and online services have reduced small and everyday bribes. But technology alone cannot change people's intentions. In some cases, corruption has not ended, it only moved. Earlier, it happened at the counter. Now it happens behind the scene, inside the system. Corruption cannot be reduced only by catching small bribe takers or digitalizing services. The real change begins at political level because politicians design the rules under which every institution functions. When elected leaders genuinely commit to transparency, corruption becomes difficult, risky, and socially unacceptable. But when leadership treats accountability as an option, corruption quietly becomes policy by default. Politicians influence corruption in three powerful ways: through the laws they pass, through the media houses or institutions they control, and through the culture they normalize. Strong laws means nothing without honest enforcement. India already has anti-corruption agencies, audit mechanisms, and vigilance system on paper. The real problem is selective actions. When investigations are allowed only against opponents and not against allies, corruption does not disappear. It simply changes loyalty. Political leadership must allow investigative agencies to function independently, without the fear of favor. Even when investigation points inward, that single change would send a message stronger than any speech. Another critical role of politicians is protecting honest officers. Across India, bureaucrats who refuse illegal orders are often transferred, sidelined, or pressurized, while those who adjust are rewarded with powerful positions. This creates a dangerous incentive structure where integrity becomes a career risk. If politicians truly want to reduce corruption, they must reverse this culture. Reward honesty, not obedience. Professionalism, not loyalty. Transparency must move beyond slogans. Public disclosure of political fundings, government contracts, and asset declarations should not be treated as a threat but as a democratic obligation. When citizens can clearly see who funds politics and who benefits from the policy decisions, corruption loses its biggest shield, the secrecy. Politicians also shape corruption through silence. When wrongdoings are exposed, leaders remain quiet, delay their responses, and deflect blames. They are promoting corruption. They normalize corruption without saying a word. Silence from power is not neutrality, it's a permission. Equally important is how politicians communicate with citizens. If leaders openly acknowledge problems, accept responsibility, and correct their mistakes, public trust in them increases. When leaders deny obvious failures and attack institutions that questions them, distrust grows and accountability collapses. Corruption thrives in environments where criticism is seen as hostility rather than correction. Finally, politicians must understand that anti-corruption is not a one-time campaign. It is a continuous discipline. Systems must be designed assuming human temptations exist, not pretending it doesn't. Strong checks, independent audits, open data, and empowered watchdogs are not obstacle to governance, they are its foundation. When political leadership treats transparency as strength, not as weakness, corruption begins to shrink naturally. Until then, no amount of technology, citizen awareness, or moral appeals will be enough. Because in any democracy, the tone of integrity is always set at the top, and the system always follows the example it shows. So where does that leave the individual citizen? This is where frustrations turned into resignation. People say nothing will change, and that belief is corruption's biggest ally. Because corruption does not only survive on money, it survives on silence and helplessness. Fighting corruption does not always mean protests or viral videos. Sometimes it means asking questions using RTI, supporting independent journalism, refusing to normalizing bribery whenever possible, understanding that corruption is not abstract, It directly decides the quality of our lives. Before ending, let's be honest with ourselves. We often criticize corruption when it harms us, but we become quiet when it benefits us. That contradiction keeps the cycle alive. Corruption is not just a political problem, it is a governance problem, it is a moral problem, it is a social problem. And unless citizens demand transparency not just during elections but every single day, corruption will keep changing its form but never truly disappear. So, what did we really learn from this? We learned that corruption is not only about big headlines or big scandals, it is about everyday systems that quietly stop working for ordinary peoples. We learned today that corruption is less visible, more technical, and often protected by procedure. And most importantly, we learned that corruption survives not because people love it, but because people feel powerless against it. As individuals, we may not control the governments or systems, but we do control our silence, our awareness, and our choices. Asking questions, staying informed, and refusing to normalize wrongdoings may seem very small, but they are the foundation of accountability. Remember, corruption thrives in darkness and transparency begin with attention. And the moment when citizens stop paying attention, corruption starts winning. That's all about this video. If you find this video helpful, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like this video. I will be back with another informative video next week. Till then, take care and stay informed.